Tonight on Bridge City News, a Lethbridge City Councillor brought forth a motion today to have conversion therapy banned. Our country's Foreign Affairs Minister gives an update as to how many Canadians have been brought back from China in light of the coronavirus. And a special prom was held over the weekend to celebrate those with disabilities.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Lethbridge City Council accepted a motion today brought forth by Councillor Jeff Carlson to prohibit conversion therapy. The practice aims to change a person's sexual orientation through counseling, behavior modification, or religious teachings.
I want to send my heartfelt appreciation out to Councillors Carlson and Councillors Mirashiro for putting their names behind this, moving this forward. I want to thank everyone who voted against it. And I think it's a shame that there were some votes against the second part of the resolution. I think the science is out there, the evidence is there. In this day and age, being a member of the LGBTQ2+ community is no longer considered a mental illness. So to be arguing about why we shouldn't be standing up for protections for everyone in 2020, over 50 years after homosexuality was decriminalized, it's a shame.
Edmonton, St. Albert, and Vancouver have already banned the practice. Calgary is looking at doing the same. In December of last year, Federal Justice Minister David Lametti received his mandate letter from Prime Minister Justin Trudeau that included instructions to amend the criminal code to ban the practice of conversion therapy. Now, conversion therapy is a hot-button topic in many regions across the country. Bridge City News is producing a one-hour special on the topic. Journalist Paul Arthur joins me now. Now, Paul, we've interviewed many guests for and against this practice.
For sure. Some were adamantly opposed. They'd even like to see it made into a criminal offense. And the other concern from the other side is, does this put clergy at risk, for example? If a congregation member has some issues with sexual orientation, wants some advice or some prayer, and voluntarily asks for help, two consenting adults talking about this, does that make someone a criminal? Most people would say, boy, that seems a little bit of a government overreach, but these are some of the issues that we're grappling with here. And we're going to have a special coming up on that. In fact, here's a sample of what you can expect in that.
Surgery doesn't solve anything. Hormones don't solve anything.
There is no proof anywhere in the world that conversion therapy works no matter what your age is.
I wanted it to believe that I could be accepted by my staff.
The problem was not the fact that they were treating those issues, it is the way they were treating those issues.
Let's take this federal. We can ban it in Alberta. It's being banned in a few other provinces. Let's ban it all at once.
And frankly, that's what they're doing in Edmonton. They now have, through this bylaw, an opportunity to go into churches and regulate how you pray.
A parent now is handcuffed in the treatments they're allowed to pursue for their child.
It's not trying to force someone to be something that they are not.
They are dealing with a very significant emotional trauma.
Watch for the one-hour BCN special on conversion therapy coming up soon right here on Miracle Channel. Canadian figure skating legend Kurt Browning made his stop in our city over the weekend. The four-time world champion put on a display of talent and led a couple of skating seminars for the Lethbridge Figure Skating Club.
The inspiration, you can see the kids trying harder, especially being today day 2 of the seminar. You see that they're building on what they've learned from yesterday with him, which is fantastic to see. He's really looking for the direction from the skaters as to where they want to go. Do they want to do more choreography? Do they want to do more jumps and spins and have his feedback? So every session has been a little bit different, but the theme of it has been build on what you know and make it better.
Browning was the first skater to ever land a ratified quadruple toe loop jump in competition at the '88 World Championships. Lethbridge College held its winter open house over the weekend, giving prospective students the chance to meet with instructors and to make plans for their post-secondary careers.
Our open houses are really beneficial for any type of student who's considering and going to college or just exploring any post-secondary education. Our open houses have all of our different program areas that are on display. So we have over 55 different programs that are on display, all equipped with all of our instructors. So all of them bring a wealth of knowledge. You can sit down, ask them about their programs, get to know who they really are and what to expect in classes. We have a lot of interactive tours and labs happening throughout the day as well. Tuition really ranges depending on what program that that you enroll in. But most of our students can expect to pay per semester about $3 to $4 grand.
Over 5,000 students are enrolled in Lethbridge College, including a number of seniors. Each year, a special prom night event is held to celebrate people with special needs. It is the brainchild of Christian athlete and former NFL quarterback Tim Tebow. Loris Alexander took in a very special Night to Shine at Victory Church in Lethbridge recently and has the details.
The 6th annual Tim Tebow Night to Shine took place Friday night, with cities all over the world taking part, including my Victory Church in Lethbridge.
It's big for our hearts because we love the opportunity to get to honor those people in our community and within our families and the people that we know and love.
The event was started to give young people with special needs an opportunity to experience a prom and be treated like royalty. But more than anything, all the kings and queens, including a member of parliament, really enjoyed one thing.
I have been known to go out on the dance floor and of course take lots of photos with people. They enjoy that as well. And more than anything, I just like complimenting people and being a part of celebrating who they are.
It's fun watching people dance and just have fun.
My favorite part, well, I just do this and this and do that and that.
What's your favorite part?
Me.
Oh, him. What about dancing on the stage?
Dancing on the stage.
Nice to have a dance like this. Not many probably haven't gone to grad or anything. And so this is a great experience for everybody.
There was even a surprise proposal.
It lighted up my life. Like I didn't know this was coming, so.
I wanted everybody to be welcome to it.
It seems like a lot of hard work put into this event. Will it be the last year?
Not at all. We're going to do this. This is the best night of the year. It's amazing, and we're going to continue doing it as long as we can.
For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
With this year's Night to Shine, 115,000 honored guests around the world participated with the support of over 200,000 volunteers. Abortion is legal in Canada, but is still quite controversial. That was especially true of people in Lethbridge when they complained about seeing anti-abortion ads on bus benches which were taken down. Carol Crossan is a Calgary constitutional lawyer who's representing Lethbridge and District Pro-Life. She says the city brought down the ads for the wrong reasons.
One of the ads was, "Birth did not transform me into a child." The city said that that ad was inaccurate because the law doesn't count a fetus as a child. And so the question at the hearing was, well, what does the law say? And in the criminal code does say that a fetus is a child.
Calgary constitutional lawyer Carol Crossan will have more on their battle with the city of Lethbridge coming up after business news. The founder of a Calgary charity which provides subsidized pet care for low-income people is hoping to raise about $30,000 to open a pet-friendly homeless shelter. Melissa David says if enough money is raised through GoFundMe, she plans to open a 25-bed shelter with space for expansion. David says the homeless in Calgary have to choose between a warm bed in a shelter or staying outside with their pets. If successful, the shelter might also accommodate domestic violence victims who are afraid to leave their animals behind. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says there is room for cooperation with Quebec, especially around Quebec's willingness to boost liquefied gas exports using feedstock from Alberta. Kenney is wrapping up a week-long Eastern tour, which took him to both Montreal and Washington. He says Alberta's new Montreal-based trade office will be part of a push to strengthen ties and to find common ground with Quebec. Kenney previously criticized Quebec for rejecting pipelines on environmental reasons, while at the same time receiving billions in equalization payments that come from them. Premier Kenney is also calling out Democrats in the United States who want to block the Keystone XL pipeline expansion. When Kenney visited the Canadian Embassy in Washington, he asked why a party which claims to be best friends with Canada would want to undermine one of its most important industries. Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders and Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren have promised to block the project should they win the White House.
There are some candidates who are threatening to tear up a presidential permit which is the basis for a multi-billion-dollar Canadian investment to create jobs in this country. That, I don't think, reflects the spirit of friendship that has always underscored the Canada-U.S. relationship. So all of us object to protectionism, whichever end of Pennsylvania Avenue it emanates from. But this is, I think, even worse than protectionism because this would be saying after a good faith investment, multi-billion-dollar investment by Canadians to create jobs in the United States, to improve their continental energy security and access, that a president would come along after the fact and tear that up and try to pull the pipe out of the ground and put people out of work, causing Canadians to incur significant financial and economic damages.
Kenny likened opposing Keystone XL to endorsing more OPEC dictatorship oil from the Middle East. Our country's foreign affairs minister says a second plane has departed for Asia. Francois-Philippe Champagne says it's on its way to evacuate Canadians from the epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak in China. The government is also monitoring the plight of Canadian passengers quarantined on a cruise ship in Japan.
I wanted to make sure that All in America is doing everything on the Diamond Princess, which is in a port in Japan. We have 255 Canadians, which are currently quarantined. We have 7 Canadians who have tested positive for the coronavirus, and I wanted to make sure that we were all linked up, making sure that we're there for the families, for the people who are there. And before I came to see you, I learned that the plane which is going to repatriate, the second Canadian plane has just left Trenton on its way, obviously, to Asia. As we said, we would bring back Canadians.
A video has surfaced on social media showing people in China who refuse to self-quarantine being forcibly taken away from an apartment. The incident occurred in the city of Kunshan. Have a look. So far, the coronavirus has claimed 910 lives with over 40,000 confirmed cases, most of them in China. Scientists around the world are quickly working to create a vaccine. So far, there are no confirmed cases of the coronavirus in Alberta. Across Canada, there have been 7 confirmed cases. Tom Katina is a missionary doctor who has been working in Africa for over 20 years. He is currently in the Sudan, helping those both physically and spiritually. Dr. Katina recently spoke with BCN's Jeanette Rocher and says there are many challenges in Sudan, especially when patients are brought in by the truckloads.
At a nighttime, we'd have truckloads of wounded show up at our gate. And then I was the only doctor here, and we had a couple of clinical officers and some on-the-job trained nurses. That was it. Trying to get through this crowd is very stressful, a very difficult time. But I think this idea about being a missionary, both not only me, but the sisters who are here and the priests, we said, let's pull together and for the sake of the people, let's keep pushing ahead. And, I think with the grace of God, this is what kept us going.
Catch the full interview with missionary Dr. Tom Katina and Jeanette Rocher coming up in the second half of our show. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau met with various African leaders over the weekend, including the President of Somalia. Trudeau also took a moment to remember the victims, including 18 Canadians of last spring's deadly plane crash in Ethiopia.
I know that Ethiopians and Canadians will continue to stand shoulder to shoulder in good times and in bad. Because whether it's the vibrant Ethiopian Canadian community back home or the entrepreneurs who work together across an ocean, we can rely on each other. Our government will continue to lead on combating plastic pollution, just like we will continue to lead on addressing climate change. In fact, Canada will provide funding to the World Bank for climate resilience and new support for women, which attests to the strength of our commitment.
Now, after leaving Somalia, Trudeau visited with Canadian troops at an air base in Kuwait. The Prime Minister says he knows 2020 has been a tough start for our troops and thanked our soldiers for fighting Islamic extremists.
One of the things that I know your families were certainly worried about, but all Canadians were worried about, was your safety when things heated up around here. And I know that you are all trained to deal with the situations. It's the careers you chose, it's the professionalism you have, it's the abilities you have. But a lot of Canadians who always think about you, we're specifically thinking about your safety and thankful for you being here. And there was always a few questions of okay, well, remind us again why Canadian troops are in the Middle East right now. It is because we have been as a country, essential in the efforts to defeat Daesh.
Thousands of European students took part in a recent 6-day evangelism conference. Many were seeking ways to respond to Europe's spiritual hunger. The Revive Europe conference inspired hope that a continent dismissed by many as post-Christian might yet experience a spiritual awakening.
Christian university student movements throughout Europe had spent 2 years preparing to welcome 2020 with Revive Europe as their theme. Some arriving students were amazed to see so many Christian young people in the same place.
My favorite part about Revive Conference is to see how many people from different contexts have the same joy of worshiping Jesus.
Although the focus was Europe, university students and graduates came from a total of 68 countries. An international group of speakers took their audience back to the days of the early church so they could better understand how to share the message of Christ in their universities and in the nations of Europe, which many consider a post-Christian continent.
In the last couple of years, there has been an increase in conferences of any sort where thousands of young people come together. I can speak for Germany. We have a movement called the Holy Spirit Night, where in several cities people come together in the thousands, sometimes even in the 10,000s. It's a sign for young people who are hungry for more of God, and we really see this as encouraging signs.
Revive Europe's main focus was personal revival, followed by the need for revival on university campuses and across the continent.
There is hope for Europe because Christ is in you. And the question is, are you willing to share this hope with others?
We have been sent into the world to be inwardly strong, outwardly focused, and ablaze with the love of Christ.
Between sessions, attendees explored the artistic expression of students' faith, learned about Christian ministries and mission groups, and shared and prayed with each other. The year-end conference was organized by the International Fellowship of Evangelical Students, which works with student movements in over 170 nations. Victoria Harold Perez for the Global News Alliance.
That is so nice to see. We had lots of cloud cover again today, but still not that cold considering we're into February. In fact, warmer temperatures are just around the corner. Full weather details are on deck. We had some clouds mixed with sunshine today and hovered around the freezing mark. Tonight, just a few clouds developing with a low near -7. Tomorrow, chance of rain developing as we should warm up to a balmy 5 degrees. Wednesday, overcast with the mercury dropping to -7. Thursday, a mixture of sun and cloud and a high near +7. Friday, cooling off slightly to 4 degrees under a cloudy sky with a light risk of flurries. So far, not a bad weekend is shaping up. Partly cloudy and 4 degrees on Saturday. We should see a high of 5 on Sunday. Checking the almanac, the average high for this time of year is 1 degree and an average low of -11. The highest temperature on this date was recorded in 1987 at 13 degrees, and the record low, a chilly -38 in 1939. Sunrise was at 7:51, sunset at 5:40. Let's see how tomorrow's shaping up across the country now. Expect rain and a high of 10 degrees in Victoria, BC. Showers and 6s on tap for Vancouver. Rain and 6 degrees as well for Calgary on Tuesday. Expect snow and a high of 2 degrees in Edmonton. Regina and Saskatoon should both receive light snow and a high of -2 tomorrow. A slight chance of flurries at -2 degrees as well for Winnipeg. Expect lots of clouds and a high of 4 degrees for Toronto. Mainly cloudy and 2 is on tap for Ottawa. A chance of flurries at -1 for Montreal. In Atlantic Canada, expect snow mixed with rain and a high of +1 for Fredericton, New Brunswick. Snow mixed with rain and a high of 2 degrees for Halifax, Nova Scotia. Snow in Charlottetown, PEI, and a high expected near -1. And in St. John's, Newfoundland, you should receive some snow and a high near 0 tomorrow. Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland met with federal lawmakers in Washington over the weekend. The plan is to fortify trade ties with the Americans. Freeland, who was joined by Canadian premiers, appreciated their support behind the new NAFTA deal. She is calling on her government for a quick passage of the federal government's implementation bill for the USMCA.
We now have a foundation around which there is real cross-party support that I believe allows us to move together economically as a continent. And we've managed to achieve that at a time when many other parts of the world are experiencing a lot more turbulence in their trade relationships with each other. So I think it is a real advantage for North America, and it's one of the reasons that I am calling so strongly for Canadians, for Canadian MPs of all parties to support this new NAFTA agreement so that Canada can move forward and so that North America can move forward together.
Finance Minister Bill Morneau says Ottawa is launching a new set of consultations with Indigenous leaders that will determine if and how they may take part in ownership of the Trans Mountain Pipeline expansion. The minister, who was speaking in Calgary, said up to 129 communities will be consulted over the next few months.
We've already gone through an important step in the consultation project with Indigenous peoples. We had extensive discussions over the course of the fall. We released a report, What We Heard report, in December. Our next step really is set to commence very shortly in terms of who we intend on discussing the project with. There's 129 affected Indigenous peoples along the route that we will be reaching out to in the short term. We'll be seeking both an opportunity to discuss potential approaches, whether they're based on an equity model or some sort of revenue sharing model, trying to find some form of consensus so we can move forward with the groups.
A new $2 million grant program is now available to help grain farmers in Alberta. The funds will be used toward grain handling systems. Applicants will be able to choose equipment that works for the size and volume of their agribusiness. Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, Devin Dreeshen, says the new program will help Alberta farmers remain competitive and keep producing the best quality food in the world. The program will be retroactive to April of last year to accommodate 100 applicants who've been waiting. The Canadian Agricultural Partnership is a 5-year, $3 billion commitment by provincial, federal, and territorial governments that supports our country's agri-food and agri-product sectors. Restaurant Brands International says sales grew a year ago, but the Tim Hortons performance did not reflect the strength of the brand. RBI says it is going to work on refocusing the chain on its founding values in an effort to reignite growth in Canada. The parent company of Tim's, Burger King, and Popeyes is raising its quarterly dividend, even though its net income fell from $307 to $257 million. Comparable sales at Tim Hortons fell 4.3%, but rose 2.8% at Burger King and a whopping 34% at Popeyes, thanks to the new chicken sandwich. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The TSX was up 85 points on the day to 17,740. The Dow was up 175 points to 29,276. The S&P 500 was up 24 points to 3352, and the Nasdaq was up 107 points to 9628. Oil was down 67 cents to 49.65 per barrel. Natural gas was down 9 cents to $1.77. Gold was down 5 cents to 15.7210 an ounce, and silver was up 2 cents to 17.79 an ounce. Wheat is at $228 per metric ton, barley's at $229, canola's at $4.50, and corn is at $269 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.13 to $118.68. Feeder cattle were up 50 cents to $135.70. Lean hogs were down $1.18 to $65.08. And the Canadian dollar was unchanged on the day at 75.09 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Lethbridge City Council accepted a motion today brought forth by Councillor Jeff Carlson to prohibit conversion therapy. The practice aims to change a person's sexual orientation through counseling, behavior modification, or religious teachings. Edmonton, St. Albert, and Vancouver have already banned the practice. Calgary is looking at doing the same. Lethbridge Pro-Life has hired a Calgary lawyer to fight for the right to have pro-life ads on city buses and bus benches. Up next, I chat with constitutional lawyer Carol Crossan, who discusses the big issues Lethbridge City Council has with the ads, and hear about her fight for freedom of speech. That interview is coming up. But first, here's a look what's happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News Community Calendar. Come for a fun evening filled with musical entertainment to the Lethbridge Community Brass Choir's Brass Day Concert, featuring international trumpet soloist and jazz artist Rex Richardson, on Saturday, February 29th, beginning at 7 p.m. at College Drive Community Church. Tickets are $15 and free for children under 12. Purchase yours today at CASA or visit lcbs.yapcity.com. For details, go to lcbs.ca. Big Brothers Big Sisters in Lethbridge is searching for volunteers to mentor children and youth in their various programs. Volunteers commit anywhere from 1 hour a week to 1 full year. They have many kids on their wait list that are looking for a big brother or sister. Make a difference in a child's life and start something big. For more information, call 403-328-9355 or email info.leth@bigbrothersbigsisters.ca. Come for a night of down-home fun to the Friends Winter Barn Dance on Saturday, March 7th, beginning at 7 p.m. at the Galt Museum and Archives. Wear your best Western hat and boots and dance the night away. Proceeds will go towards educational programs at the Galt. Tickets are $30 for adults, $20 for youth ages 11 to 17, and children 10 and under are free. Purchase yours by visiting galtmuseum.com. And that's your Bridge City News Community Calendar.
Abortion. It's legal in Canada, but it still brings up many strong emotions in Canadians. Now, the question is, are both sides truly free to express their viewpoints in the country, or is there maybe a bit of a double standard? Carol Crossan is a Calgary constitutional lawyer who's representing Lethbridge and District Pro-Life and their court case with the City of Lethbridge. Welcome to Bridge City News.
Thanks, Hal.
So give our viewers a little bit of backstory on this case here, Carol.
Well, this is a case that came before the court here in Lethbridge in October. But it goes back a while. So for a year and a half, Lethbridge Pro-Life worked with the city to attempt to get up one of their ads called Preborn Babies Feel Pain, and underneath the caption, say no to abortion. But after a year and a half, they were just making no headway, Hal. And so they asked me to write a letter to the city to ask the city for some clear reasons as to why they couldn't post the ad. And then a month later, the city said they'd post the ad. So that spring, the city indeed did post that ad, and within a few weeks, they pulled the ad down.
What was the reason behind it? Did they say it was too graphic, a lot of complaints?
No. The city said due to adverse community reaction. They said they'd received some complaints, around 100 correspondences, most of which they said were complaints.
We have 100,000 people here, 100 complaints? Yeah. That doesn't seem like a lot.
100 complaints, right. And from what we know now of the record, those were inspired in part by some abortion rights groups that did some lobbying to the city, some fairly aggressive lobbying to the city, and then the city pulled the ad. And in fact, in their publication of pulling the ad, they advertised the handles of two of the people that had done a lot of the campaigning. What's strange though, Hal, is at the same time there were two petitions that had circulated in the Lethbridge area by individuals outside of Lethbridge Pro-Life who gathered over 3,000 names on those petitions simply asking for the city to respect the free speech rights of Lethbridge Pro-Life.
And what became of that?
Not much, actually. In fact, when we got to court, the city had not even included that in the record of what had happened. So no response from the city, as far as we know, to the people that made the petitions. And the city chose instead to listen to the 100 rather than the over 3,000.
So the 100 people that did call in, email their councillors, maybe talk to the mayor, just call the city, many of those people, as well that we talked to here at Bridge City News, said it was just way too graphic. It was highly inappropriate. How do you respond to that?
Well, if you see the ad, which I'm sure your viewers will have a chance to, the ad is simply a picture of a baby in utero with the caption, "Preborn babies feel pain." I think that you'd find something like that in a high school textbook.
Now, the city actually argues, Carol, that the ads are causing emotional harm to people.
Well,
isn't that really subjective?
Let me just tie between the dots here.
Okay.
I'll draw a line between the dots on this. The first ad that was taken down, subsequent to that, Lethbridge Pro-Life went back to the city. They, no matter how they negotiated, they couldn't get that ad back up. So they asked for 5 new ads to be put up. Not Preborn Babies Feel Pain, but 5 new ads. And so those ads, they ranged anywhere from human rights should not depend upon where you are, with a picture of a pregnant woman on one side of the page, and on the other side, that same woman holding a baby. Birth did not transform me into a child, with a picture of a newborn baby swaddled up. Another one, equality should begin in the womb. Life should be the most fundamental human right. And the last one, a picture of 3 babies, one early in utero, further along in utero, and then a newborn baby saying, me again, and still me. Do you call those graphic, Hal? Are those scary, traumatizing ads?
Well, you wouldn't think so, right?
You wouldn't.
Did the Canadian Ads Standards Council get involved as well?
They did, yeah. And that was one of the reasons that the city refused the ads. They said they were relying upon their Code of Advertising. The Canadian Code of Advertising is a private code put out by a private regulator, Ad Standards Canada. It's not a group that has any legal clout. The Canadian Code is not legislation. But they did render a decision on those ads, and they said that they were inaccurate for various reasons.
Have we heard of any cases, Carol, of maybe pro-choice ads being removed or people complaining about those ads?
No. Hal.
Something comparable?
Nothing I'm aware of.
Wow. So what's next for you guys then?
Well, we're waiting for the decision, and we'll see what Justice Gates has to say. That was the justice that we sat in front of, and he was very attentive, very engaged. We had a great hearing.
What arguments did the city give, Carol, in regards to the ads allegedly containing inaccurate or misleading information?
Some of the reasons that the city gave in that the ads were inaccurate, I mean, one of them I find pretty fascinating. One of the ads was, "Birth did not transform me into a child." The city said that that ad was inaccurate because the law doesn't count a fetus as a child. And so the question at the hearing was, well, what does the law say? And in the criminal code does say that a fetus is a child. And when it's born, under 223 of the criminal code, it becomes a human being. And so it was difficult to address that in the hearing because the city had given a wrong answer on the law and refused the ad for the wrong reason.
Does the city actually have the authority to decide what is accurate and what's not when it comes to a controversial issue like abortion?
Well, Hal, the courts, including the Supreme Court of Canada, have never entertained accuracy as a legitimate basis for denying freedom of expression. There was a case many years ago in regard to a Holocaust denier where the court said that false information was not a basis to restrict freedom of expression.
Now, essentially, this really boils down to the city not allowing the freedom of expression to all residents, even if it doesn't fit into what the city feels appropriate. Isn't this a bit of a slippery slope, though, for residents?
I think it's a slippery slope for all Canadians. I think all Canadians are experiencing an erosion of the right to free speech, a right to disseminate beliefs in Canada. This is what I litigate on consistently.
So when will we know what the court decision on this case will be?
Oh, it's a secret, Hal. I don't know. I don't get advance notice, but I'm sure it'll come out in prompt fashion.
Is there a comparable case that maybe the judge can reflect back on as saying, you know, this is a previous case, so we're going to go down a very similar road, making my decision?
There's some cases that the judge can draw on. There's been a number of bus advertising cases in Canada that the judge will look at. I'm hoping he will hearken back as well to the basic principles in freedom of expression.
Now, you're also representing an interesting case in Toronto too, Carol, where Pastor David Lynn was arrested last summer for preaching the gospel in the gay village, I'm guessing around Church Street in Toronto here, allegedly causing a disturbance. Right. But you say otherwise. It wasn't he causing the disturbance, but maybe the protesters?
It's a very interesting case. I mean, it's a novel case here in Canada, and I think it's unsettling for a lot of people, Hal. I think a lot of pastors are concerned about it. The very first hearing I attended, the courthouse was flooded. I would say hundreds of pastors attended, many of them immigrant pastors. And Hal, I think that's because those folks, they came from other countries to Canada for our freedoms. And so when those freedoms are now being threatened, it's important for them to be part of the discussion.
Well, Toronto Mayor John Tory went on record saying that free speech has its limits. How do you respond to that?
Well, you know, Mayor Tory is 100% right, but these were the wrong limits. The law already gives us limits on freedom of speech. And you know what's interesting in the case of David Lynn? He experienced those limits that very morning. See, that incident in question where he was arrested, he was on something called his Toronto tour. David Lynn is a street preacher. He's preached for years, 22 in total in the GTA, 10 in downtown Toronto. He was on a tour. He was going to different locations in Toronto. And just that morning, he'd been harassed by a woman. Some individuals had tried to destroy his property. He carries a mic and a speaker with him. And there were police at the scene. And he and his associates asked the police, "Are we doing anything wrong that we're being harassed like this?" And the police said, "No, unless you advocate genocide under the criminal code or you're guilty of hate speech, no, you have a right to freedom of expression." But that was not so that afternoon.
What's interesting too is I was in Calgary recently at a Tim Hortons location and I saw this young man came in And he was actually preaching to a lot of the younger people. When I say young man, he's probably 30, 35, okay?
Yes.
But he was preaching to some of the teenagers at Tim Hortons, right? And I thought, well, that's kind of cool. That's unique or different. But at the same time, that can be unsettling for some other people that may want to consider suing, or maybe could the owner of that establishment sue that individual for coming in?
Well, the difference there, Hal, is that that's private property. But on government property, on city streets, the courts have been clear. We have a right to exercise our charter rights. And that's exactly what David Lynn was doing that day. In fact, I don't know if you've seen the video, but on YouTube there's raw, unedited footage of that day, of that incident. All he's sharing is John 3:16, that God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. And there he is sharing that, and the officer comes up to him and says, "I'd like you to turn that mic off." And he said, "Well, I know I don't have to because it's legal for me to use a mic," but he turned it off, and then he said, "I'm going to go back to preach." And the officer said, "No, you can't. If you go back to preach the gospel, then I'm going to arrest you for causing a disturbance. You're upsetting these people." And that's never been a justification for prohibiting somebody's speech. In fact, the courts in Ontario have come out in the past 2 years to say that is never a reason to restrict freedom of expression.
Do you think maybe down in the States they have more opportunities for freedom of speech than we have here in Canada? Less restrictions?
That may be. I mean, I know they're more vocal in some ways down there than we are up here.
A lot of special interest groups, right, down in the States.
That could well be.
Strong voices.
Yeah, but I do know in Canada, our rights are being challenged. And you know, freedom is in the heart of every individual. That's what we live for. And it's the bedrock of a democracy.
Isn't it in our Constitution as well, Carol?
It is. It's the Charter.
Freedom of speech?
Section 2A is freedom of religion. Section 2B is freedom of expression. And that's the highest law in the land.
Where do you see this going in the next 5 or 10 years? Is it going to become more restrictive? Or do you think enough special interest groups, maybe Christians, or even other faith-based groups, you know, Jewish people, Muslims, Sikhs, say, you know, we've had enough. We want our voices heard, and we have every right to have that voice heard.
You know, Hal, if we do not exercise our rights and stand for our rights, we lose our rights. And so it will all depend on the Canadian population. Will we stand? Will you stand? Will I stand? I have many, many clients who stand. I have a client right now on a university campus in Toronto who's being told she can't get discrimination services because she believes the wrong thing. I have clients who've been assaulted and their assaulter found guilty under criminal law of assault simply because they share the wrong message. I mean, we see this.
So if it doesn't fall in line with maybe a college or university's ideology, and maybe an agenda they want to push, you know, that's when they'll be assaulted or attacked.
But if we allow it, it just gets worse. We can't allow it. We have to lovingly, firmly put our foot down. And so many people are, and I hope that that increases. Because when we do that, it's not just good for people who believe in certain values. It's good for everybody. Freedom of expression is truly for everyone. It's not just for the opinion that you believe. It's for the opinion of others. And that's what a democracy is all about. We have to maintain that. It's crucial.
Carol Crossing, Calgary constitutional lawyer, thank you so much for enlightening me and the education today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity to be here, Hal.
We're all aware of the difficult and needy conditions in war-torn countries around the globe. Hunger, disease, and lack of proper medical care is part of this. It seems like a black hole, but there are some who believe that we can make a difference. Today's guest is Dr. Tom Katina, an American Catholic doctor who is a medical missionary in Sudan, the only surgeon for 1.3 million people in that whole area that he serves. Welcome to BCN, Dr. Katina.
Thank you very much. Wonderful to be here.
African Mission Healthcare recently awarded you with the Gerson Award Prize for Outstanding Christian Medical Missionary Service. And it's sponsored by Jewish philanthropists Rabbi Erica and Mark Gerson. So why don't you tell us about this award that you've won? What is it, and what did you do to win it?
Well, it's very interesting because the award is for Christian medical missionaries. It is given by two practicing Jews, Mark Gerson, who's a financial guy in New York, and his wife Erica, who's a rabbi. And I think for them, they see the value of mission medicine in Africa. I mean, in East Africa, for instance, 45% of the healthcare is provided by mission hospitals and mission clinics. And this award is given to a mission doctor, usually somebody who served for many years in the field, for their outstanding work. And I think I'm the third recipient, third or fourth, I think the fourth recipient of this prize. And it's a huge honor for me to get this.
Wow, well, congratulations. So I understand there's quite a bit of prize money involved. What are you going to do with the $500,000 prize money?
Well, we have a lot of things to use that for. It'll go for, one is our running costs just to run the hospital. We hope to put a lot of that towards starting a school. We're in a part of the world which has very, very few trained health professionals. Actually, our first Nuba medical doctor will be starting to work with us in June of this year. So we want to start a school to train nurses, midwives, and clinical officers, which are like physician assistants. There's nothing like that here in Nuba. So we'd like to start that school, and I think this prize money will go a long way towards realizing that goal.
That's wonderful. Now, why did you decide to become a medical missionary and leave behind a prosperous life in the United States?
Well, you know, I always, I think from my early days when I was in university, I wanted to do mission work, some kind of mission work. Yet I was studying mechanical engineering. So when I was in college, and there wasn't much of a match between mission work and engineering. So the idea just popped in my head to go into medicine. I thought that was a much better fit between being a missionary and doing what I love to do, which is sciences and working with people. And like I was saying before, I thought I would come for 1 year to the mission field and then go back to the US and have a normal life in the white picket fence. And, you know, Africa has a way of kind of putting a hook into you and keeping you around. So 1 year led to 2 to 5. Now it's been 20 years. And I think I'm fully hooked. I'm all in.
So in which country did you first begin your missionary journey?
I started in Kenya. I was at a rural hospital called Mutomo. That was in 2000. I got there in January 2000. I was there about 2.5 years, and then went to Nairobi for 5 or 6 years, 5 years in Nairobi, another several months in a place in northern Kenya, and then I came here to Sudan. Started here in 2008, and I've been here ever since.
Wow. So you are working in Sudan now, which at times is a war zone. How do you handle that pressure of violence and the trauma of devastating injuries and the emotional impact of all of that?
Yeah, well, it was very interesting because when we first started in 2008, it was a very rare time in Sudan's history when there was peace. There was peace from 2008 until 2011, when our region called the Nuba Mountains broke out in war again. So June 2011, there was a very serious civil war broke out. And that civil war lasted from then until just recently when a ceasefire was signed. And, you know, it was amazing. Went overnight from being just a big kind of general hospital treating all kinds of things to being almost like a MASH unit. I mean, the place was just full of wounded, both soldiers and civilians. And it was a very different environment and very stressful. We'd have 50 or 100 wounded show up at a go. And at nighttime, we'd have truckloads of wounded show up at our gate. And then I was the only doctor here, and we had a couple of clinical officers and some on-the-job trained nurses. That was it. Trying to get through this crowd is very stressful, a very difficult time. But I think this idea about being a missionary, both not only me, but the sisters who are here and the priests, we said, let's pull together and for the sake of the people, let's keep pushing ahead. And you know, I think with the grace of God, this is what kept us going up to this day. I have no doubt that's the only reason that we're still here and that we kept going through all these hardships.
Yeah, that's amazing. Are you able to share any stories of your life or a coworker's life being put in serious danger because of the military conflict?
Our hospital proper was bombed on 2 occasions. This back in 2014. The bombs just dropped just on the periphery of the hospital. I mean, the explosion was so loud, I feel like it dropped within our courtyard. Our local area, just a stone's throw from us, has been dropped. The bombs have been dropped several times from the airplanes. The village right next to us has been bombed several times. We've been told to evacuate 2 different occasions because we thought the Sudan army was going to have an offensive and overrun the hospital. So, I mean, most of the time during this period, we've been subject to some pretty frightening times.
That's amazing. I understand that you see as many as 350 patients in a single day. How does this affect you physically and emotionally? It must be draining.
It's well, I'll be honest, it's very tiresome, but it's amazing what you can get used to. I mean, when I first started working in Africa 20 years ago, I never thought I would be able to do that. But I think you just get used to things. You know, you start and when you have 300, 400 patients to see, you start with number one, you just see number two, then before you know it, you've seen 400, and you adapt your style, you adapt your way of doing things, and you just manage to make it through. Um, Obviously, we can't spend that much time with each patient, unfortunately, but you'd be amazed what you can do if you set your mind to it.
Absolutely. What types of medical treatments are the people coming to the hospital for?
We have all the usual basic tropical diseases. So common ones here are malaria, schistosomiasis, which is very common as part of the world, all kinds of pneumonias and diarrheal disease. We have a lot of tuberculosis. We have a lot of leprosy. It's one of the last places on earth which has a lot of active cases of leprosy. We have a lot of leishmaniasis, another tropical disease. And then in addition to that, we have a lot of cancers, and I don't have a real good explanation for that. But I mean, a good 20, 30% of our inpatients are cancer patients, all kinds of cancers. You know, liver cancer, cervical cancer, lymphomas, leukemias, all kinds of strange cancers. A lot of cancer, very heavy cancer burden here. And then a lot of trauma, maternity cases, you name it.
Yeah, for sure. What's the response from the community for the treatment that you and your other committed staff provide them?
Well, it's interesting because when we first started 12 years ago, it was a bit surprising. They welcomed us, but not, I wouldn't say with open arms. There was a bit of suspicion that who are these people? Are they coming from overseas? Are they coming to help us? Are they coming to, trick us like the people in the North that have been their enemies forever? So it took time to get their trust. Now, after the fighting started and we stayed here and stuck it out with them, that's when they really trusted us. And our bond with the community is very tight. We're very close with the community, and I think the services that our staff provide here are very, very much appreciated by the people of Nuba, for sure.
Yeah, you just had to build that trust, I guess, over time. Do you have any stories of individuals' lives that have changed from your efforts?
I mean, we've had countless numbers of people that obviously have improved. Well, I'll just give you, one example is a guy, he was a soldier he was hit with a landmine. He was in a truck and his vehicle was hit with a landmine and his leg was blown off. So we amputated his leg, and the amputation didn't do well. So we had to do a very high amputation on him. And he ended up we got a prosthetic leg for him. He ended up coming back and working as a nurse for us. We had another guy who lost both legs, another soldier lost both legs, double amputee. We amputated both his legs. We had a group come up and fit him with bilateral prosthetic legs. And now he's got a business here in our little village, and he's able to ride a motorcycle, get around, buy goods, sell things at his shop. These are just two soldiers, let alone the countless people that have TB and malnourished kids, civilians that have been damaged by war, all kinds of cancer patients. It's quite a few, actually.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, getting back to kind of the heart of the matter, are people coming to know Christ as a result of this medical mission that you're on?
It's interesting because I think our approach to evangelization is quite low key. We are in an area which is about about 40% Christian, about 50% Muslim. And I think the way I approach it is what speaks loudest is your actions. There's an expression by Saint Francis, who's my favorite saint, along with half the world's favorite saint. And supposedly he said, preach always and sometimes use words. And I take that very much to heart, that I think if we can just stick it out and show these people the love of Christ by what we do, that will speak volumes. And I can't tell you that we have people coming to us saying, I want to receive Christ and I want to be baptized. I can't say that honestly. But I trust in God that God is guiding us in our work as missionaries, that we are showing people the love of Christ. And I just have to go with that.
Yeah, that's amazing. What kind of support do you get from the staff at the hospital?
We're better off than we first started. We have about 20 trained nurses, and these are people that we hired as high school graduates. We trained them on the job. Then we sent them off to South Sudan for nursing school, and they've come back and now are working with us. We have 5 or 6 clinical officers, which are like physician assistants. And these are also people that we trained. We sent them off to school, and now they're back. I have one other doctor with me now, a pediatrician from the US who's helping us now. And we'll have our first trained NUBA doctor coming in June. And he's a guy that worked with us briefly. We sent him to medical school in Kenya. Now he'll come back to be a full-fledged medical doctor starting in June. And they're the ones doing most of the day-to-day work, all the NUBA staff. So little by little, we're getting to the point where the NUBA are really taking charge of the hospital and doing the work. And that's our goal.
Right. And Dr. Cantino, what kinds of supplies, are you still in needs of supplies and equipment at the hospital? Are you still looking for support in that way?
We are. For equipment, we're not doing too bad. Actually, now we're in the process of trying to get eye equipment. We had a clinical officer that we sent to school. Now we're sending him to another school to learn how to do eye surgery. And we're trying to outfit an eye operating room. We have a guy that's working on it now. Most of our problem is our running costs. So medicines, supplies, all this stuff we have to get every year. We have to buy everything in Kenya, which is 2 countries away. It's got to come by truck through Kenya, Uganda, all the way through South Sudan to reach us. And we're always looking for ways to raise money to buy this stuff. Everything we do here is with private individual funds. We don't have any big donors that are behind us. All of our finances come from private individuals, both to pay the staff, to buy medicines, to buy fuel, what have you. It all comes from private individuals.
Are there some things about African culture that you wish that would be adopted over here?
I think my 20 years here, I'm definitely an Afrophile or Africanophile. I think the general approach, certainly in Tebow Mountains, even in Kenya, was people are much more focused on community, on individuals, on relationships, as opposed to money and position and power and these kind of things. So it's especially in Tebow Mountains is almost a very anti-materialistic society. It's all about the family and about relationships are very important here. And I think that's something in the Western world that we've lost big time. I'll give you an example. I just found this out a couple of years ago. We have a lot of staff that'll travel 7-8 days walking to reach us. I was asking our staff, what happens? Like when they start the journey and they walk for a day, where do they sleep? Like there aren't, they don't have much money. They don't have hotels. There's nothing like that here. This is totally very rural, basic Africa. There are no hotels, motels, anything. They said, no, if they're on the journey, and it gets in the evening time, they'll just stop at somebody's house or somebody's tukul, their small grass huts. And they say, look, I'm traveling to the hospital. It's several days away. Can I spend the night with you? And those people are obligated. They'll take them in for the night. They'll give them food, they'll give them a place to wash, and they'll give them a place to sleep for the night. Next morning, they'll give them something in the morning for breakfast, or some tea or whatever, and they'll send them on their way. The next night, they'll do the same thing. So, I think that's something that speaks to the society here. You can just kind of show up at somebody's house as a stranger, and they'll take you in because they know that this is the reality there. And you can imagine somebody in the US, in New York City, showing up at your door saying, look, I'm traveling, can I spend the night with you? They will be calling the police. There are so many things about the society which are very welcoming and in many ways are very Christian, that I think due to our fast-paced society and our materialistic culture, we've lost so much of that, unfortunately.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Cantino. It's been a pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you so much. It was wonderful to be here with you guys.
Great. Dr. Tom Cantino is an American Catholic doctor who is a medical missionary in Sudan. On behalf of all of us here at BCN, thank you for watching.